recommend a meal like this, full of so many vitamins, like vitamin N, B, and C.
Look at me and tell me what you see. I look at you and tell you what I feel. Look at me and tell me what you see. I look at you and tell you what I feel.
Welcome back to the Hannibal Lecter series with the final movie, Hannibal Rising. A movie, and indeed even a novel, that most Hannibal fans consider non-canon, mainly because Dino De Laurentiis, the movie's producer, said to Thomas Harris, "If you don't write it, I'll find someone else who will." Which is a pretty shocking way to treat any artist, let alone the guy responsible for creating one of movie's greatest villains. I digress. Let's see what Harris came up with. The film begins in Lithuania 1944. Because despite being exclusively played by British actors up to this point, Lecter is now Lithuanian. We're introduced to Hannibal and his sister Misha, although we don't learn his identity yet, mainly because Misha is an incredibly large part of this story. Then at Lecter Castle, yes, apparently he had a castle, the family are quickly packing up and leaving because the Third Reich is goose-stepping across Europe with Lithuania next in line. Hannibal is called to his mother's room to carry valuables, but it's so we can see the hidden compartments that will be important later. The Lecters are moving to a nearby lodge to hide out and wait for the Nazis to pass through the region, but unfortunately they've invaded the castle, and the needed food and supplies is prevented from reaching the family at the cottage. We're then introduced to the film's central antagonists, who are Lithuanians wanting to join the SS, proving themselves by killing the Jewish cook and interrogating the other employee about his religion. But they soon get word of Russian tanks approaching, forcing them to mobilize. And going back to the subject of nationality changes, the ringleader of our bad guys, named Grutas, is played by the Welshiest of Welsh actors, Rhys Ifans, which, firstly, there's comparison to be made there between him and the also Welsh actor Anthony Hopkins. But I'm not complaining about Ifans' acting, because he's pretty damn good. I'm just wondering, is there not a single Lithuanian actor out there? Because it seems like the film didn't even try. At the cottage, Happy Families is cut short when a Russian tank rolls up asking for... No, they're pointing the cannon at the house. They're demanding water, and for everyone to leave. But while they get water, a German plane attacks them, gunning down Hannibal's father, and then crashing into the tank spectacularly. Even though you can tell the plane itself is still relatively intact. You gotta hand it to German engineering. They can survive a 300km/h crash and not turn into shrapnel soup. Impressive. Well, everyone is now dead, even Hannibal's mother, who he goes to just before she dies, and prevents Misha from coming nearer, as the bullets are catching fire and firing on their own, even though the bullets would just explode in reality. And back with Grutas and his gang, the SS troops they were with have all been wiped out, so he's decided to go freelance, shooting the wounded officer in the head and taking all the valuables they can carry, as they run away from the advancing Russian tanks. They hear on the radio that looters are being shot, so they need to hide out. So yeah, they find the cabin breaking in, chaining up both Hannibal and his sister, even eating the food Hannibal was feeding to Misha. Because these guys are absolutely the worst of the worst and have no redeeming qualities or even personality outside of that whatsoever. It makes for a very easy set of bad guys. And isn't that just depressing? When this series began with subtlety and clever villains written beautifully, and these are just as stock as they come. And I can't even blame the filmmakers for watering down Harris's characters, because he wrote the screenplay. And on the radio, Grutas hears that roadblocks are everywhere, so there's no way they can make an escape. And also, there's no food, with the men fighting over a single bird, which Grutas eats raw, because again, evil. And then of course, he says...
We eat or die.
As they all look at the children ominously. Getting the cannibalism right in there from the get-go, aren't they? Also, it should be clear that much like Hannibal, Lecter's character has gone full-on anti-hero for this film. There's no moral ambiguity for anything he does, because the people he's doing it to are so reprehensible, further watering down what made Silence of the Lambs so great. We then skip ahead to long after World Kerfuffle 2, 8 years later, and Lecter Castle has been appropriated by the Soviet Socialist Republic, and turned into an orphanage where Hannibal is now living, being played by Gaspard Ulliel, who at the time was a completely unknown actor, and is still a completely unknown actor. In fact, the last thing I saw him in was a Chanel cologne commercial.
I'm not going to be the person I'm expected to be anymore.
So not the best outcome from playing one of the most iconic film characters ever. Oh, and he's French. So again, the film not even trying with its casting. The orphanage is having a group sing-along of what, I'm not sure. But Lecter is silent, apparently mute and traumatised by his wartime experience. However, one of the other boys disagrees, as Lecter sleep talks, getting a fork in his hand for his troubles when he tries to hit Hannibal, who is then called into the office to be told off.
Hannibal, you do not honor the human pecking order. You're always hurting the bullies.
Yeah, when that's considered a bad thing by the system, that's a pretty fucked up system. And that night, Lecter has flashbacks of Grutas and the gang, causing him to scream Misha's name as he's woken up by the bully, who throws him in the basement. The bully's about to attack, but backs off when Lecter defends himself with a sickle. Hannibal finds a bear trap while looking around, but also his own Shawshank hole to escape through, as he gets back into the office to take what's left inside his mother's hidden safe. He looks set to kill the bully, but decides against it. But when they find Lecter has gone, he stumbles into the bear trap anyway, so Hannibal got some revenge there. So after escaping the orphanage, Lecter, using his mother's letters, has gone to France to find a Japanese relative of his. But that means he has to somehow get across the east to west German border, which he finds remarkably easy, so that's something else he can add to his list of skills. Now, the German border was difficult enough, but it's pretty remarkable he was able to get through Lithuania, Denmark, or Belarus, it's never specified, Poland, and all of Germany to get to France, smack bang in the middle of the Cold War. And none of that deserved even a passing mention in this, the epic story of the rise of Hannibal Lecter? Really? It's such a missed opportunity, especially because in the book, Hannibal's uncle just picks him up from the orphanage. So it's the film seemingly going out of its way to leave stuff out. Hannibal does indeed make it to his aunt's mansion completely without incident. The guard dog catches him but doesn't attack, and showing the letters, he's taken inside for food. Lady Murasaki informs him of his uncle's death, but allows Lecter to stay. Lecter has more flashbacks, but is unable to recall anything that happens in them, and the next day, while being taught some Japanese flower arranging, he's distracted by a boiling pot, causing more flashbacks, and Hannibal then cuts himself with the pruning knife. As he's quickly stitched up though, Lecter looks on creepily, finally talking to say thank you. I really wish they had played up Hannibal's trauma from his childhood, because they show the flashbacks and him reacting to it, but it all feels a bit unsubstantial. Maybe it's the fault of the writing, maybe it's the fault of Ulliel's acting, but it all just feels like the director just saying this person is traumatized with no meaningful evidence. That night, Hannibal sees Lady Murasaki going into the attic and follows her, watching as she kneels before her family's suit of armour and dice show. She notices Hannibal, who kneels down with her, and is told how Murasaki prays to her ancestors and has the honour of polishing the armour and swords with oil of clove. Which is a big plot point that this film has to spell out to you, mainly because it's a pretty ridiculous plot point that, unless it's explained to you, would have you scratching your head. But I'll go into that a bit later. Lady Murasaki tells Hannibal about the battle for Osaka Castle, and how the samurai displayed the heads of their fallen enemies, which I'm sure you can tell Hannibal takes quite a liking to. We then bizarrely get a training montage of Hannibal learning kendo with Murasaki, which finishes quickly, mainly because it's to set up Lecter's proficiency with a katana. Later at a market, Hannibal and Murasaki are shopping, and a butcher decides to make pretty disgusting racist remarks.
Hey, Japanese, tell me the truth. Does your pussy run crossways?
And we all know how Hannibal detests rudeness, so he beats the man with a hammer until the police have to break it up. And back at the mansion, Hannibal is cleaning the family katana. Now, this is something that really annoys me, and it's not exclusive to this film, but it's really obvious here. Just listen. What's with that horrible sound? How bad must Hannibal be handling that sword for it to make such an awful, scraping metal sound? For comparison, here's my katana. See? No sound, because there's no reason for it to do that. And is he cleaning that thing with sandpaper? And then Hannibal just has to wear the samurai face guard because of his muzzle in the asylum, as some kind of nonsensical mythical nod to it. Clearly just blatant shallow fan service. And I've no idea how that thing is staying on his face either. They do need a cord to hold it on, you know. Moving on, the butcher from before is fishing when he hears someone approach, and he finds Lecter back at his truck demanding an apology for Lady Murasaki. The butcher is another reprehensible human being, reaffirming his racism, so Lecter responds to him.
Jap pussy runs crossways. You should fuck that little Jap and see for yourself.
Crossways like that.
The butcher is quite outmatched as Lecter proceeds to cut him up and then removes the guy's head, making sure to get dinner before leaving. Now in the book, Paul Momond, the butcher, is Lecter's first cannibalism as well as kill. But I think the movie changed it for the better, making it one of Grutas's crew the first person he ate. Because it shows a slow progression from murder to cannibalism, and it would make sense that he would want to eat the wannabe Nazis because of what they did to Misha. We're then introduced to Inspector Popeil, who's investigating the butcher's murder, and like a frickin' bloodhound, he smells...
Smells like that toothache remedy.
Yes, oil of cloves.
And the stupidity of this plot point is, firstly, there would not be enough detectable scent transferred from the blade to the body, and secondly, pure oil of clove causes a katana's blade to rust. They use a clove extract at a ratio of 1/10 to 1/100th, making it even more ridiculous. And the fact that the inspector uses this flimsy piece of evidence to suspect Hannibal throughout the film is stupid beyond belief. Back at the mansion, the chef is educating Lecter while serving the butcher's fish, talking about how the cheeks are the best part, another fact Lecter takes specific note of. When Lady Murasaki arrives at the armor room that night, she finds Lecter's gift, the butcher's head. Hannibal shows up, assuring her there's not a nick in the blade, but I beg to differ. After those god-awful scraping sounds. And no, I'm never going to let that go. The inspector soon arrives and Murasaki tells Hannibal to wash his hands and get rid of the smell of the sword. Again, stupid plot point, moving on. And because Hannibal fought with the butcher, that's grounds for the inspector to take him in for questioning, where oddly they subject Hannibal to a polygraph test. Why would they immediately jump to using the polygraph instead of, oh, I don't know, actually ask questions like detectives are supposed to do? Furthermore, the polygraph is and has always been considered unreliable and not admissible in court, making the entire exercise completely pointless. Oh wait, we need to see how the detective is horrified that Hannibal reacts to nothing like a psychopath would, getting that out of the way cleanly and lazily. I think we can all tell at this point that Thomas Harris really didn't give a shit. And after wasting time, the inspector actually asks proper questions now, and as war crimes are his speciality, he can understand Hannibal's trauma from the war. And I have to hand it to Uliel, because he does conjure up the image of Hopkins Lecter here, when he says that men like the butcher helped the Germans ship people to concentration camps, so that makes them both suspects.
Then we are both suspects. I can say you were fishing with me if you like.
It doesn't happen often, which I think is mostly down to the writing, but Gaspard Ulliel really does try his damnedest to play a role that would be one hell of a challenge for anyone, really. Also, fun fact for the Hannibal TV show fans, but Hugh Dancy, who plays Will Graham in the show, also auditioned for the role of Lecter in this movie. I'm always amazed at the connections that are out there. The inspector, despite having nothing but very weak circumstantial evidence, looks to take Hannibal down for the butcher's murder. However, they're interrupted by a commotion outside, and they find the butcher's head placed there made to look like a political killing by Lady Murasaki, so Hannibal gets to go free. And back at the mansion, Lecter, while praying to his family, informs them that he's the youngest person to be allowed to attend medical school, getting a full work scholarship. While talking to Murasaki, he admits he's desperately trying to remember the names of Grutas's men. While doing his hospital duties, Hannibal shows up at the prison to remove the body of a war criminal who's being interrogated by Popeil before his execution for war crimes, and they use the drug sodium thiopental to help him remember his former wartime colleagues. When Popeil gets the required information, the criminal is swiftly removed to the guillotine. The French really got a hell of a lot of use out of the guillotine, didn't they? It's so weird to think that they were still using it when the first Star Wars movie came out. Back at Hannibal's bedsit, he's taken the same drug Popeil used, intending to jog his memory to retrieve information on Misha's killers. Also, it is actually a nice touch that Hannibal plays this song. Which is the same one he listened to during his escape in Silence of the Lambs, so kudos there at least, filmmakers. But anyway, Lecter then gets the full flashback of what happened, which you've all pretty much guessed by now, but basically, the men discovered that Misha had pneumonia, so decided to kill and then eat her. Yet, soon after, the cottage was shelled, forcing them to leave, but one of the men was crushed in the rubble, along with the other men's dog tags. A young Hannibal was then found and rescued by the advancing Russian forces. However, considering where he ended up, rescued might not be the best word. But now Hannibal has a mission to return to the cottage and find the dog tags which will tell him the names of the men he's after, even though World War II German dog tags only had a serial number and the unit they came from. But don't tell Hannibal, leave him be, he's happy doing what he's doing. And at the border crossing, Lecter shows his passport, and wouldn't you know the damn luck, the guy who sees the passport is in contact with one of the Grutas' men, who recognises his name and spies on Hannibal as he goes through the remains of the cottage. Which has to be an unbelievable amount of coincidence, that the guy who can give Lecter the locations of the remaining men not only works for border control, but also decides to follow Lecter, ultimately leading to his own capture and interrogation. What I'm saying is, this movie's contrived as fuck. Hannibal managed to find his sister's remains, plus the bag containing the dog tags and his mother's jewellery, so a good haul really. The guy then foolishly tries to attack him, and is very quickly knocked out, so that went very well for Hannibal. In the morning, Hannibal buries Misha's remains, then turns his attention to Dortlik, who he's tied with a rope to a tree, and tying the other end to his horse, starts to get all the men's locations. Dortlik initially claims the men are all dead, but a tight rope quickly changes his mind, giving up Kolnas. And then Uriel shows us his scariest face, as he kills Dortlik, getting splashed with his blood, giving him the idea to cook him, but only his cheeks. He's starting small, I guess. Which is such a better way of doing things than in the book. It's a story of revenge, so it makes sense for Hannibal to eat the people who ate his sister. It's perfectly circular. Back at Lecter's bedsit, Murasaki is there waiting for him and can immediately smell blood on him. He tells her the men are in France, so they go to a restaurant owned by one of them, Kolnas, and Lecter notices a cage of ortolan birds, an important detail for later, and more of the film spelling itself out. While they sit down to eat, that's when Kolnas enters with his family, and Lecter sees his daughter, offering her a cherry. He notices that Kolnas has given her Misha's bracelet, which is pretty damn sick in itself. And then Hannibal sings to her.
Ein Männlein steht im Wasser ganz still und stumm.
Wow, he really is incapable of acting anything but creepy as fuck, isn't he? But I guess this is before he gained any kind of blending in abilities. And Kolnas finds his own dog tag in his daughter's pocket, yet Murasaki and Lecter have quickly left. Kolnas goes to where Grutas is now living on a houseboat, dealing with smuggled weapons and the sex slave trade, so he's not changed one bit. He tells Grutas what happened to Dortlik, but Grutas is unconcerned, telling one of the others, Milko, to find and kill Lecter. So Milko spies on Lecter, taking pictures of him, and... Now, what is the point in getting a tiny spy camera if you're just going to stand in the street, very obviously taking pictures, completely defeating the purpose of the camera's size and spying as a whole? Later in the evening, Murasaki gets a visit from the inspector, who's investigating Dortlik's death, suspecting Hannibal once more, but with some actual evidence this time. He's also quite the rude motherfucker, taking Murasaki's family sword, inspecting the blade. I know he's a detective, but as Lecter would say, it's the height of rudeness not to even ask first. Popeil tells Murasaki that he knows she's protecting Hannibal, and in Hannibal's bedsit he finds the drawings of Grutas and his men, so he's all but certain of Lecter's guilt. And I know I'm giving Popeil a lot of flack, but one aspect of his character I really do like is that although he wants to stop Hannibal from killing, he also completely understands his quest for revenge, and would rather work with him to catch and execute the men. So he at least has a more well-rounded character for the most part. Lecter is working late at the school preparing bodies for autopsy, but he's also engaging in his own research. Milko breaks in while Lecter is distracted, however he does sense the windows open. He narrowly misses getting shot before Milko tries again, yet Lecter is one step ahead. Using a severed arm, he fools Milko long enough to get behind him and drug him unconscious. Milko wakes up trapped in the embalming tank while Lecter interrogates him for the location of Grutas's houseboat, before drowning the guy in the tank. And that actor, Stephen Walters, is actually incredibly claustrophobic, so he definitely isn't acting in this scene at all. Talk about taking one for the team. And while Lecter kills Milko, Inspector Popeil has broken in looking for him. He's straight to the point, telling Hannibal he's found the dog tags in his room and will arrest him if he murders anyone in France. Popeil informs Lecter that Grutas wasn't convicted at the Nuremberg trials because a witness got acid down her throat. And you can tell that Popeil is really desperate to bring Grutas to justice. I like the strange juxtaposition between these two characters. They both want to find Grutas, and they both want to kill him. The only difference is that Popeil is a legal murderer. So, really, in the end, both men are exactly the same. So Popeil brings Lecter to the station once again to record Hannibal's version of events at the cottage. But we know all we need to know, so really it's for clarity at this point. Afterwards, Popeil is lenient with him. As long as he shares everything he knows, he'll let Hannibal go. But he still has Lecter followed so they can arrest him once he leads them to Grutas. Hannibal goes to Murasaki's apartment and she begs him to give Grutas to the authorities, but he can't stop now since he's so close and promised revenge for Misha. They then kiss each other, which is pretty weird considering she's his aunt and all, and Hannibal leaves to finish his mission, evading the men following him for Popeil. But he doesn't go without a plan, as Lecter devises a rudimentary time bomb first and then doing some recon, so he's playing it very smart. Grutas acts like an evil bastard as he's getting one of his slave women to shave his chest, while he physically and verbally abuses her. But Hannibal is laying in wait in the shower, coming out gun drawn. But the maid sees through the door and gets the guard, who manages to stop Lecter before he can do anything. But don't worry, we still need more of a reason to want Hannibal to kill Grutas.
Would you have fed me to your little sister because you loved her?
Yes.
I love myself that much, and I would never apologize to you.
They're really laying it on thick with Grutas being irredeemably evil. I mean, I know they have to make the bad guys worse than Lecter like they did with Mason Verger, but for this story it's really not necessary. Fortunately, Hannibal isn't an idiot, and before Grutas can kill him, the time bomb explodes, taking out the power, allowing Hannibal to escape. And the woman tries to fight with Grutas, but he just shoots her dead. It's a shame he doesn't have a moustache to twirl. Although, knowing this film, I'm surprised they didn't give him a toothbrush moustache, full-on Hitler style. Lecter returns home to find that Murasaki is gone, and he receives a call from Grutas, ordering him to bring everything he has, or he'll kill her. Murasaki hits the birdcage, letting Hannibal hear the ortolans, which, because of the prior highlight of it, he knows to head back to Kolnas's restaurant. He takes the tanto knife with him while Murasaki is placed captive on Grutas's boat, and at the restaurant, Hannibal confronts Kolnas, who tries to reason with him. Lecter tells Kolnas he's been at his home, showing Misha's bracelet, and handing him a bloody bag. But it's just a beef roast. He attacks Hannibal, wanting to know what happened to his daughter. However, Lecter negotiates for information on Lady Murasaki, and Kolnas gives up the boat's location, but discovers his family are safe. Which I'm pretty sure the Hannibal Lecter of Silence of the Lambs wouldn't have thought twice about harming the guy's family. Maybe not the children, but he would have done something. But I guess this Lecter is still just starting out, and the film is pretty devoted to making him a full-on anti-hero anyway. Realizing he's been tricked, Kolnas stupidly tries to grab the gun, so Hannibal sticks the tanto through his head, but doesn't eat him, probably because he's in a hurry. Lecter stealthily climbs onto the boat, causing the captain to fall overboard and get crushed between the boat and the wall for some distraction. Grutas leaves Murasaki alone, but manages to shoot Hannibal in the back, easily convinced that Lecter is completely paralyzed without actually doing any kind of real check. So yeah, he's a complete idiot. He starts to molest Lady Murasaki while Lecter watches, but it's revealed that the bullet hit the tanto, which Lecter uses to cut both of Grutas's hamstrings, disabling him. He gets Grutas to give up Grentz, who's in Canada, and then the big dramatic supposed twist occurs, when Grutas tells him that he was fed Misha too.
You ate her. Half conscious. Your little lips, greedy around the spoon.
Which is supposed to be a big, horrible twist, and Lecter acts all traumatized from it. But clearly he didn't know, and it was Grutas who did the killing. So on the scale of bad actions, he's nowhere near as horrible as Grutas is. And it's not really that big of a shock moment the film was aiming for. Hannibal goes full on crazy, carving a big M into Grutas' chest. So if you needed any more comparison to Inglourious Basterds, there you go. While Murasaki looks on horrified. She's forced to kill a crewman to protect Hannibal, and she tries once again to stop him. But he's pretty much committed now, driving Lady Murasaki away. He then chews off Grutas' cheeks and blows up the boat to mask his escape, with the inspector taking care of Lady Murasaki, thinking he died in the explosion. Hannibal somehow then makes his way to Canada, finding Grents, the last of Grutas' men. And I would complain yet again about how is it possible for Lecter to make it across the world without being seen, but in the 1950s, it's still way more goddamn plausible than all the times he did it in Hannibal. And the film ends with this pretty appropriate line from Lecter.
I came to collect a head.
So that was Hannibal Rising, and it's a really standard by-the-numbers film, and nowhere near what the character of Lecter deserved. And really, I can completely understand Thomas Harris not giving a shit about this story, considering how completely strong-armed he was into writing it. Clearly he knew this story didn't need to be told, but they wanted that Hannibal cash money. It's pretty pathetic. The film can be relatively entertaining at times, but it lacks any kind of subtlety or intelligence Silence of the Lambs had. This film could have been written by anyone, really. There's nothing that makes it unique. It's just so standard. That's the only word I can think of for it. And in some ways, that's actually worse than it being utterly terrible. It's not memorable at all. So yeah, the Hannibal movies had their ups and downs, and I wish I could say at least we have the TV show, but that's been cancelled because NBC doesn't know quality when it sees it. And as it's been a while to complete the Hannibal series, next video is going to be similar in tone and subject, to ease the change into something hopefully completely different. So until then, see you next time.